Hi, hello, welcome to Oxford and welcome to our webinar for today. This is the latest webinar in our series in impact investing. So this is in support of our Oxford Impact Investing Executive Education Programme. On the webinar today, the main session will be hosted by Gayle Peterson, who is the Programme Director for the Impact Investing Programme here at Oxford. Gayle is also very experienced with advising foundations and investors in social finance over the last 25 years. She has put together a wonderful panel for us today, and Gayle will introduce those in a little bit more detail in a moment. But they include Joanna Reynolds, who is a director with the Mars Centre, leading the way in social finance in Canada, with Ryan Little, who is a director with the BMW-Foundation, who is very active in impact investing, and we'll be hearing some of their insights from the investor side. And also with Sandrine Henton, who is an alumnus of our executive program here in Oxford from the first iteration 2 years ago, and has since gone on to found her own impact investing fund, and we'll hear about the work of some of that and some of her projects in a few minutes' time. The basic format for today is that we would like this to be quite an interactive session. So we expect to be on for about 45 to 50 minutes. Gayle Peterson will do an introduction for 5 minutes or so to set the scene, where we are in terms of the executive program in Oxford, where we are in the world of impact investing, and really the main themes for today, which is how to bring impact investing to scale. We will then have a short presentation from the members of the panel, which will be about 5 minutes each, with some of their main learnings and sharing points for us. And then there will be a discussion panel. So we would welcome you to enter questions at any time, and you can do that using the question panel, which you should hopefully see on your screen in front of you, and then we will put those to the panelists and sharing their experience. So we have a wonderful turnout today, so thank you very much for dialing in and dialing in on time. We have people from many different countries logged in actually at the moment, so we have a full house. So without further ado, I will pass over to Gayle to introduce the webinar for us today. Thank you, Gayle.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome everyone, and again, Damien behind the scenes, Steve Brewster, who is a fabulous team member. Damien is going to be controlling the slides, so we want to acknowledge everyone behind the scenes as well. So with that, this is really talking about, Damien, you want to shift to the next slides, few slides for me? Okay. It's really, again, this is an opportunity for us to see what Oxford looks like, and the purpose of these webinars is really to bring you into our community and to help you understand who we are, what we do, and where you study. And again, it's spring in Oxford, and it's a blizzard where I am. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are joining us. The series, our goals are really, again, to share with you groundbreaking ideas, bringing in, for the most part, our faculty and our students and our colleagues and friends. These are pioneers who are doing remarkable work, and we want to be able to share those ideas with you so that you can get a sense of who we are and what we offer. Our goal is to build a global community of leading pioneers who are doing remarkable work in the space of impact investing and social finance. And our goal, again, is to really understand how we can define and shape the future of impact investing and the broader field of social finance. So thank you for joining us today. There's Saïd Business School. Again, for those of you who are joining us who are alums, you'll remember the place well, and for those who we hope will join us, it's important for you to see it's actually sunny in England today. Next slide, thank you. As Steve pointed out, we've got remarkable people joining us: Joanna Reynolds, Sandrine Henton, and Ryan Little, and you. So thank you very much for joining us. Next slide. As Steve pointed out, we have almost 190 people registered for this webinar today, and you represent the world. And that global perspective is, again, what makes our program unique. We literally are the community in which you see. And so we typically have 20 countries represented, and in April, as Steve will point out, we have 45 people registered already from 15 to 20 different countries in the world. So we give you a very unique perspective, and you represent our community. So just wanted to let you see where you're from and with whom we're working. This is what our classroom looks like, and there's actually Sandrine from our first class in Oxford 3 years ago, as well as Alex and Steve. When we think about scale, and again, the numbers have ranged from billions to trillions in terms of the impact for economic opportunities and revenue flow from impact investing. The World Economic Forum has really put in, how do we mainstream ideas to action? And in terms of the key points we're going to talk about today, the issue of intentionality, that we're not, we're being opportunistic, this is a new field, but intentionality matters, and measurement of social and financial goals are important. How we pilot, how we use policy as a tool, the intentionality and purpose of our work, the partnerships, and key points of learning by doing, failing fast, taking that feedback into our thought processes, and re-engineering or recalibrating. So we're really going to talk about how we take a nascent field to scale, and we're doing it by giving you illustrations of pilots, innovators in the field, to share with you what they're doing. Next slide, please. When we are at Oxford, we actually go through a design process that is every person who comes to Oxford takes away with them a workbook and a plan for themselves. And we go through 3 phases: plan and partner, act and assess, reflect and recalibrate, which are parallel to what the World Economic Forum is recommending as we move from idea to mainstream in impact investing. And our community, again, represents the world. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with that, I want to begin by talking about Ryan and Joanna and Sandrine. These are colleagues and friends, and that's the sense of community that we want to give you. Each of them will bring their own unique perspective. As Ryan has been working, BMW-Foundation has been working from Beijing to Berlin and all points in between. Ryan is a social entrepreneur, has started 2 successful businesses, and is a master at doing pitches. Joanna is one of our former students and also one of our mentors from last year's class, and she has the wonderful task of scaling social impact in Canada. She's going to talk about how you, in fact, create a movement in Canada and beyond, and she's been tapping our fellow students from India to Brazil on ways to, again, share the Canadian way and learn and innovate. And Sandrine, who's a remarkable student from our first cohort in class, is doing groundbreaking work by starting Educate Global Fund. And she'll talk about what she's doing to pilot this exciting initiative and how you start a fund. It's from scratch. So with that, I want to stop talking and actually turn it over to our panelists, who are the brilliance behind what we do. So Ryan, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to you in terms of what are your aha moments when you think about scaling, and what are you learning? So give us a little bit of your insights.
Well, thanks, Gayle, and hello, everyone. We're new on the block as an impact investor ourselves, the BMW-Foundation. We've really only been looking at this topic for about the last year. And about a year ago, we took the decision to set aside 15% of our endowment for impact investments and kind of figure out, make that big decision and then kind of figure out how we're going to do this. I think, right from the beginning, we knew that we were going to need partners because, as you mentioned, we're a global organization, that we would need a lot of partners to work with to start sourcing deals, to kind of get smart about the different sectors, to do things like co-investment. I think what has been kind of an aha moment for me, and if I look, specifically at the German landscape, but I think Joanna would probably say she's had a similar experience in Canada, and Big Society Capital would say the same in the UK, is that it's not just about kind of sourcing the deals, but it's about building the ecosystem at the same time. And so what we've seen here is that if I talk to a social entrepreneur, I'll hear that there are no investors out there, there are no impact investors out there. And if I talk to an impact investor, I'll hear that there are no investable deals out there. And so I think a lot of the thinking we've been doing is about how to bridge that gap. And so now we're wearing this dual hat of both trying to find deals where we can invest our, the 15% of our endowment that we set aside for this, but also how we can help make impact investment kind of a viable happening thing here. In doing that, we've supported organizations like Impact Hub and FASA, which is a great new organization that was sort of born of Ashoka here in Germany. It's financing agency for social entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of this comes back to working with organizations and helping them transition from how to receive grants to how to kind of look at this from a different lens, and how to look at investment and some of the different things that come with that. So I guess my biggest aha moment has been that this is about ecosystem building as much as anything else. Another aha moment, and if you could go to the next slide, was about language and how important language is to this, because as maybe my entrepreneurial background, I kind of want to just get going and start investing in things, and impact investment, I think my initial view was that we all know what this is. It means we're going to look at social and environmental return as important as financial return. And actually, the more I've gotten into it, the more I realize it's not as plain and simple as that. The slide I've got up there is just some definitions from different organizations, which I think kind of demonstrate some of the spectrum. But I've also noticed this. I mean, we've been dealing with this internally within our organization, where while in finance there are kind of more standard metrics that you're talking about when you're looking at risk and reward, different biases come out in talking about impact, and different kind of lenses come out, and topics like the role of the state and privatization versus public good. We have this debate about kindergarten sometimes internally, and whether that's an impact investment or not. Renewable energy, if renewable energy in and of itself is an impact investment. So I think my second aha moment was that the language really matters, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get everyone on board, and to really kind of get your biases or your views out on the table. So that was really interesting, and it's hard to do that kind of in a vacuum. So the best way we've been able to do that is I would bring kind of a straw man deal to the table and say, okay, what do we like about this? What don't we like about this? Rather than sitting down and trying to say these are investment priorities and geographies and that type of thing. So working, developing a strategy through examples.
And Ryan, one of the things we talked about prior to the session was you come at this with an MBA, but it's beyond the deal sheet. Those personal relationships that you're building matter just as much as do the numbers add up. Again, that concept of trust and partnership, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I think this, I always laugh, because when I did an MBA, everyone was so concerned about showing up for finance class, and then the organizational behavior class was the one that people kind of slept through. And in the end, that's the one that always seems to matter the most, because you could have I could bring the best deal in the world to the table, and if I don't have the buy-in from all the different stakeholders, and the trust, it's not going to get anywhere. So I think, yeah, this is really important, getting the timing right, getting the buy-in, making sure that people are informed, and really kind of making this a collaboration is important. And this kind of stuff takes time. This is a very, very quickly growing sector, as you all know, but it takes time, and you can't kind of push a deal through before it's ready.
Yeah, no, that's really, thank you for sharing that. And I'm involved in a $1 billion deal right now, and the biggest obstacle is not about the numbers, it's about the relationships, and that's what's getting in the way. So everyone go to this course, and also look at organizational behavior and leadership as a model. So I'm going to turn it over to Joanna, and I had the opportunity to actually visit Mars Center for Impact Investing, and it is absolutely a remarkable experience. It is this dynamic hub of people with great energy and great ideas. And so, Joanna, I want to talk about, turn it over to you to talk about Mars and your experience and how you're creating a movement for social investing and impact investing in Canada and beyond. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gayle. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And thanks, Ryan, for those insightful words. I just want to start with introducing the Mars Center for Impact Investing. It's a unique and wonderful place. We're situated here at the Mars Discovery District here in Toronto, which is an innovation hub that supports business development. And our focus is really on creating an impact investing marketplace in Canada. Could you change the slide, Damien? So we have a team of 16 people. We started off with just 3 or 4 of us, but we've grown over the last few years to a team of 16. And we really are about mobilizing private capital for public good. And that means working across the different segments within the marketplace, from the demand side to the supply side and the intermediaries in between. So I'm going to tell you what we do now, but then I'll go back and just talk a little bit about how we got to where we are. So today we have 3 core offerings, and there's programs embedded within each of these offerings. But the first one is around capital advisory services. So we support investors to find the right kind of investment opportunity for them, develop a strategy with foundations or with funds, individuals to create a strategy that works for them for investing into funds or ventures for impact. And then our second area is around venture support programs. So we provide hands-on, we have an incubation or accelerator program called Impact 8, and I'll get into some of other initiatives, but we support ventures getting ready for investment, their pitch, their introduction to investors. It's all about moving capital into the right places, and we have such a dynamic and incredible group of ventures that we work with. And then our third area is around education and research, and that's our market building supports that go across sectors. So, Damien, if you could move the slide. I'll just say, you can advance the slide, there we go. I'll just say, Gayle, you asked, what are the critical elements that we consider are required to scaling impact investing globally or nationally or globally. I would say there's 3 things required. Leadership, creating efficient systems that make it easy for us to do this, and meeting a market need. So those are the 3 things that we've been focused on. And so in the area of leadership, we need an enabling public policy and institutional policy environment that's supportive. When we look at creating efficient systems that make it easy to do, that requires attracting potential investors and creating those mechanisms to facilitate their investment. So they need somewhere to put their investment, and it needs to flow and work with the current systems that we have in place. So that's a big challenge point right now, and we are working alongside many partners to advance that. And meeting a market need. So we need that strong pipeline of organizations and businesses that can absorb and take on new forms of capital and use it in a different way. For our not-for-profit sector, many of them are exploring new ways in which they can work with their current partners and their current stakeholders to bring the right kind of investment into their initiative in order to let it grow and be successful, as well as with our venture partners and funds. So there's new types of capital coming in and being structured that allows things to get to scale. And one example is this year we had Virgin Unite Foundation come in and bring in a $1 million first loss capital to a fund that we're starting to support social entrepreneurs at seed stage. So that first loss capital is really important because it de-risks the other types of capital that may come in from foundations and others to grow that fund into a usable fund. So those would be the three key elements for scaling globally. But I'd like to just move back to where we were and what kind of movement were we creating here in Canada. So this began in 2008, and I was fortunate to be part of that small team, but with the Social Innovation Generation, which was our organization, and we were supported by the McConnell Family Foundation. And my aha moment at that was I came into work ready to prototype, ready to build, ready to do. And I had to step back. And that was not our role at this early stage in our movement building. Instead, we started with relationship building strategies. We were the honest broker, as is often called, where there's clear ideas about a vision to create a clear idea for a vision for a national social finance agenda, and we did that by forming the Canadian Social Finance Task Force in 2010. And we realized through many conversations that there was a strong confidence in the idea. And as a result, the role of our engagement was to attract others to work and evolve that direction and allow them to see themselves within that agenda. So it was building awareness for the concept and the rationale for why impact investing was needed, and engaging opinion leaders. That was our focus. We focused on opinion leaders, thought leaders across government, community, foundation, and finance. And that is another key and unique aspect to impact investing, is that it is completely cross-sectoral. That is the innovation. We can't rest within one sector where we feel confident or where we're getting pickup. So it has to be across, I quite strongly believe it has to be across the finance community and public sectors. Our next job was to bolster what was working locally. We wanted to connect existing social finance efforts to one another across the country and grow those connections by introducing new actors who recognize the potential. So people around the table might start to feel a little uncomfortable with the folks who are coming into the space. But it is going back to what Ryan and Gayle were saying, it is relationship building, building trust and building working relationships to advance and change a pretty stubborn system. We're looking at finance, we're looking at government, we're looking through entrenched systems that we're looking for opportunities to leverage and change slightly. The other key aspect was to help others to learn from the global experience. So there's a huge, rich source of learning and ideas that can inform the Canadian strategy. So we brought people. We brought tours of people to the UK and other places where they could start to learn about how deals were being done in other places, who were the actors, who were being involved, and what was taking place. And that was absolutely key to people getting the idea and wanting to get themselves involved. And then our focus was prompting others to prototype and to test new models. And so in 2011, we launched the Center for Impact Investing. And the center moved from where we were in relationship building, building a movement of conversation, into starting to prototype and test and build those efficiencies. Damien, if you could just move to the next slide. And as Gayle and Ryan has said, what was key for us was bringing partners in. Partners and collaboration was key. So I'm just going to highlight one great platform that we have amongst many programs here at the Center for Impact Investing. But this is the SVX. It's a private online platform connecting impact investors, funds, and other investors with local opportunities. So they're seeking a social or environmental return and a financial return. This is a restricted dealer here in Ontario. We have oversight from the Ontario Securities Commission, and it's a cross-sectoral partnership. It would not have happened without the support of folks like the TMX and Tories that provided huge amounts of pro bono legal support to get it up and running. But the SVX is now scaling. We have an SVX Mexico, an SVX in California. We're launching in different parts of the country here in Canada, like in Quebec, and we're hoping it will spread to other. We're in conversations with other securities commissions because these are all oversights. And we really are, SVX has grown into a networked platform that makes it easier for people to invest. This is the first step. It's a one step. There's lots more to do in this area, but that's been the focus of our work with the SVX. If you could just advance to the next slide. Okay, so that was all. I'll leave it at that for now then, Gayle, and allow people to come in and ask any questions as we advance. So thank you.
No, that's fantastic. And again, we're trying to give you three different perspectives on how to scale these, what strategic strategies are needed for scaling. So with that, Sandrine, you're on. Again, this idea of starting a fund from scratch. Walk us through your experiences and what you've learned.
First of all, thank you, Gayle, and the team at Saïd Business School for inviting me here today. And also as alumni of the Oxford Impact Investing Program, well, this is home, and there's a lot of inspiration to launch EGF that started back in 2013. I was also inspired by the many women around me in that classroom who were launching impact funds for Indonesia, Malaysia, and as far as New Mexico. So it's really a privilege to have this community of practice as we are launching EGF, which is one of the first impact investment funds that is dedicated to education. So as we gather here, also on the topic of scaling impact investing, I will bring the perspective of a new fund manager that is working in emerging markets. And first I will introduce very briefly EGF and why we exist, and then move on to sharing our experience and how do we start an impact investment fund from scratch. Daniel, could we move to the next slide? Thank you. So EGF is really in its first year of infancy and working to establish an impact fund that is dedicated to education with an initial focus on Kenya and investing in social businesses who significantly improve educational outcomes and life chances for children in low-income communities. And we invest in basic needs and services impacting education across health, nutrition, water, sanitation, and technology, with the aim to return capital to investors over a 10 years horizon. And with the local team in Kenya, we're working very closely with entrepreneurs to allocate capital, but most importantly, provide the strategic and operational support that will enable entrepreneurs and their organizations to flourish and realize their missions. So why we exist? There are 67 million children without access to education worldwide. In Kenya, this is 67% of the youth that is unemployed, and every year 1 million young people enter the labor market without any education or skills in Kenya. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay. There are many ways and contexts with one does impact investing and starts an impact investment fund. So there's no means a recipe or a cooking book that is available to us today. So this is very much sharing the experience of how I started, and you may adapt this to your own context and organization. So my motivation really back in 2014, I really wanted to start from a blank piece of paper with working outside an institution and also financing the first year, which I call the year of learning, through my own savings and time commitment. So for me, this was the time to go to the field, and we traveled together with volunteers in Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya, and engaged with about 100 different entrepreneurs impacting education, and also stayed in full immersion with the communities in which those entrepreneurs operated. And this was really so that if we were to create a fund, it would be really using a bottom-up approach, where the thesis and the investment rationale was co-created together with entrepreneurs and communities. So this is what we took from the first year. In 2015, some of the consideration we're looking at is really putting an organization together. And it was hugely humbling to see that there's been a lot of support so far. And we've put together a council. So the council is now 15 members strong. And these are young professionals who are working within organizations. They are employed, but they are contributing their skills and knowledge pro bono. So these are what you may also call intrapreneurs. And they're engaged in EGF and helping EGF get started. We wouldn't be able to do this just with one single person. And we're now also putting together our first advisory board, raising our first operating budget. But we wouldn't be here without the entrepreneurs. So with about 10 selected social businesses in Kenya, we will pilot this year to look at what is it that EGF is trying to achieve and how we measure impact for education. And these frameworks and these very big questions need to be really answered also together with entrepreneurs in the field in a way that is very collaborative. And in doing this, we also are reaching out to strategic partners who are foundations or corporates who have done a significant body of work in the education sector or the region to actually come and share the learnings and come and see what works, but especially what doesn't work, and how are we learning from that. So to have that relationship with our strategic partners. And then finally, we look at issues of structuring an impact investment fund. There are many ways to do that, and I will refer you to read the Rockefeller Foundation report on the different ways to structure an impact investment fund and the different considerations there. Then to looking at raising capital and building the operating platform of the fund. So one of my aha moments through this process and through all the learnings and the different stages is really the importance of being mission aligned and having diversity in terms of investors and collaborators and team members and partners. That is really wonderful, but there has to be a red line or a red thread throughout, and it's really ensuring that we're keeping the integrity and in a way the legitimacy of what is the social impact that we aim to achieve. And that is really the core of what we do. And the other learning is about the need for talent and capacity building and impact investing. And especially in Kenya, to have a local team that is based in Kenya and that is able to work very closely with our entrepreneurs. So that is another area we'll be looking into. And I think another perspective to close this on the aha moment is really the importance of understanding the local context and reducing the distance between where capital is allocated and where communities and projects in the field. So this summarized sort of where we came from and sort of where we are going together with a few learnings.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that, you know, again, what we're looking at right here, you've got Joanna working at a country level, trying to build that social movement. You've got Sandrine doing something very similar on a smaller scale, and Ryan again is moving in as a foundation, both looking at investing in these kinds of projects, and the cornerstone again is building partnerships that work, building trust, building alliances, and keeping that alignment. We're happy to take questions from the audience, so if people have questions for any of our participants, please start sending them in. I want to talk about, we've got some questions where we're going to begin our conversation. In terms of those accelerators, you talked a little bit about your aha moments. The accelerators for policy, pilots and program. how are you using them? Joanna, do you want to go into a little bit greater detail about the kinds of policies that you think have been instrumental and how long it really took for you to build that base for creating policy for social finance in Canada? I think she might be on mute. Yeah, Damien? Still on mute.
I was muted. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So we can get quite specific on the policy side. So we have the public policy, which is looking at, for instance, with the not-for-profit sector. In Canada, a not-for-profit is not allowed to earn any intentional profit, even if that revenue is destined to go into the organization to advance their public benefit mission. So we are working with people across the country to advance change on that regulatory aspect. So it's a huge barrier for not-for-profit social enterprises. And we had the opportunity to be the non-government rep on the Social Investment Task Force, so that allowed us to convene a group across the country of 24 people and they chose this as one of the main issues that they would like to look at. So we've advanced a policy platform on that. The other thing is around what you might hear catalytic capital. So how can we, and that's one of those things that I've mentioned around Virgin Unite coming in with first loss capital. It's catalytic. It de-risks other investors to come in. So for instance, another policy issue that we're faced with here in Canada for foundations who are very much at the forefront, and it makes a lot of sense for them to use their foundation assets to allocate part of it, as Ryan was talking, how BMW has allocated 15% of their assets into impact. Mm-hmm. In Canada, foundations that like to do that cannot invest in a general partnership. So they can't invest into one of the many impact investing funds that we have across the country. So that is a barrier. They have to create a separate trust outside of that fund, and it's just an added thing. It's an added barrier. So when we get into public policy, we're looking at very specific things that can actually change. They're not, a lot of our public policy is very outdated. It's not up to date with the current activities in the sector. But that's not the only type of policy that is important. Institutional policy is also critical. And our financial institutions can make huge changes with where they place their policies around impact and even within our financial services sector. If we look at the basic form, Know Your Client form, which all wealth advisors are required to give to their clients, in Canada, there's nothing on that form that talks about your values of where you want your money placed. That doesn't matter to you even, like a simple check mark. So how can we really evaluate the demand for impact investing products if we have antiquated systems that actually aren't up to date with where the mindset of investors and entrepreneurs and people are going? And we're going that direction because it makes sense. It makes business sense. It makes social sense, and people want to see change to some of these very stuck issues that we've been wrestling with and are becoming more urgent. So there's a lot of common sense applications that public policy and institutional policy can, when changed and altered, can actually open a gate. And without that, we will see this sector stagnate, remain niche, and actually not get to scale. So it's that critical. And we can look at examples in other jurisdictions, like in the U.S., where policies such as the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, which happened in the 80s, has had huge impact on community investment in the United States. And so that's a policy that came into play and has had tremendous input and impact across the country. So policy is a key aspect to the whole ecosystem and getting to scale.
And Ryan and Sandrine, Ryan, do you want to add to, again, you've gotten into this area, you've been involved in a little over a year, and Germany is a vibrant economic model, but the reality is there are potential policy challenges that you're facing. So what's the role of policy in Germany and in other countries in which you're working? Oh, you have to, I think, unmute. Ryan, you have to unmute.
Yeah. Yeah, there. Okay. So this, I mean, this is an interesting question, and definitely the public policy issue plays. I think it plays a role anywhere, and it really piqued my interest when Joanna started talking about the first loss catalytic capital, because just last week there was a. I hope I'm not touting the competition, but there was the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network had a webinar last week presenting a $100 million structured fund from Luxembourg. And I think this, this is kind of an indication of how quickly this stuff is changing and how quickly this is happening. I got in touch with the presenter last week and said, I'm meeting with a large German foundation here, and we were just talking about this, and we were wondering, what are the rules around this in Germany? Maybe you know. And it turns out he didn't know, and so we thought, this is a great opportunity. These structured funds are really great ways to kind of de-risk and get some of the more conservative investors involved. And we've started taking that as kind of a piece of policy forward. And in the last little while, we're really getting here in Germany a warm and receptive ear from the Chancellor's office, from government at very high levels. I'm hosting the day after tomorrow in the evening a session here with a state secretary in our offices about the role of the state and social entrepreneurship. And I mean, just in my my 1 year here, I've seen kind of a sea change, and there's a great amount of interest in countries that have been doing this for a little bit longer than we have, and in particular Canada. Canadian by background, I've been able to bridge that gap a little bit here, and yeah, and it's been a great opportunity to work with people whose German, luckily, is much better than mine, to kind of get some of these policy issues and figure out what actually needs to change. And I think the big takeaway for me, and Joanna, maybe you've had the same experience, is that it's not that we're fighting against the system, it's just that we're dealing with a system that hasn't thought about this stuff before, and we just have to kind of figure out what needs to change to encourage this, but a lot of the right people are on side to make this happen.
That's great. So, Steve, I want to make sure, and Damien, are we getting questions from the audience that we should field while we're having these conversations? If not, we're going to continue to ask some of these pieces, some of our own questions. But please open us up to questions from the audience now.
Yeah, we have a number of questions actually, if you'd like.
Okay, fantastic. And let's just put those on the screen too, and we'll start asking those. Okay.
Well, maybe this is a question for Sandrine, one of the first ones we had in from Deborah Hallett, who asks, how well developed was your pitch before you sought support from partners?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
This is a good question. So really, it takes time, and I actually waited 12 months before. Actually, we're only starting now to engage with strategic partners, so this is maybe what's different about the approach, that it does take time to build understanding of the local context, to build an investment thesis really bottom up, and this was really designed on purpose to really wait until there is enough time to build confidence and knowledge and understanding before seeking out strategic partners, backers, or investors. And we were, I think, also very lucky. Just before Christmas, we have our first partners on board with Hogan Lovells, which will structure the legal structure of the fund pro bono. We also have support from individuals and young professionals and foundations that also want to come on board. So these conversations are really just only starting, and after 12 months.
That's great. Steve, do you want to ask more questions? That's great. Perfect.
Yeah, sure. So we have a question, a general question, I guess, saying that there's been lots of noise and discussion over the last year or so about social impact bonds. But what other innovations are the panel seeing that perhaps might encourage the scaling up from institutional investors in particular?
Joanna? Ryan? Oh, Joanna, you've got to put, we're working on our technology issue. There you go.
There you go. Sorry about that. I keep forgetting. So the social impact bond is definitely an interesting innovation that is getting a lot of traction in different parts of the world. But it is only one of the tools in the toolbox. So there are a number of I don't know if they're different tools really, but they're different people coming into play. But maybe I'll highlight one in particular. Here in Canada, we have a fund called the FIRA Fund. It's a $75 million fund that focuses on supporting young farmers get onto farmland. And that came in with 3 institutional investors at $25 million each. And it provides leasehold agreements that can turn into mortgages, and has more flexibility in the loans that they provide the farmers. They don't have to start paying them back until 3 years to allow their business to grow. So we start to look at different terms that support both the financial return, because they're getting their financial return, but enabling the purpose and the intentionality to be successful. Another fund that just finished here, which was very interesting, the Serona Asset Management has just closed a $150 million fund. And they worked, they're an international, based in Canada, but they support growth businesses, so not startups, but growth businesses in emerging markets who focus specifically on issues of poverty. And they worked with a different type of investor. So rather than being innovations in the structure, there's more a different type of investor coming in. And on average, their investments were around 250,000 to 500, I believe. And they worked a lot with family offices. And with advisors who worked with would work with a group of family offices. So those are different kinds of investors to come into this type of fund, and I think for us that's really exciting because we're looking at growing the pie of who's engaged. Here at Mars today, downstairs we have a crowd equity conference taking place. So crowd equity funding conference, we've got a lot of interest in that here in Canada. We have 2 of our provincial ministers who decided that they wanted to be here. They called us yesterday, get us on. They're here. We have corporate partners who are interested in developing crowd equity funding platforms. So this is a new area that's worth looking at, just like social impact bonds, worth discovering, getting people engaged to look at how can we make capital more accessible to support the solutions that are already here in place. And it just makes sense to do that. So people are open to it, and we see more and more in Canada. Anyways, it's much more of the private sector and the community sector who are at the forefront, and government is coming along. But we don't have as much government support, but they're moving along. We see here in Ontario we have an Office for Social Enterprise now, which is the first of its kind. Which is very good, and they've just done created 11 intermediaries across our province to support. Those are financial intermediaries to support social enterprise development investment. So that's useful. Things are happening slowly. I could move a little fast.
Thank you, Joanna. Steve, more additional questions?
Yeah, a question perhaps for Ryan. So they have a question asking how impact investors treat fund overheads. What's your take on how overheads for running the fund should be treated from an investment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the type of actor you are. In our case, we've got it very good in that none of the costs that are associated with doing our investment work in terms of personnel is coming out of is being put against the returns that are generated from the impact investment. So we've got, as a foundation, we've got it pretty easy in that sense. For some other organizations, I think they've got a harder time. And the reality is that a lot of these deals, at least at this point, are more expensive deals to kind of do due diligence on and kind of monitor. Some of them are smaller than other deals. I'm talking about direct deals specifically here. And then just by virtue of adding the extra layer, the impact layer, and having to do some kind of analysis and reporting around that, it adds some additional costs for sure. So all that to say that from our side we've got it pretty good as a foundation, but for other actors it's tougher and it's a challenge.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here as well from one of our alumni, Roland Thompson, who is now the founder and CEO of an impact investing fund. So hello, Roland, and thank you for your question. Addressed to Sandrine in particular. So the question is, during your fund startup phase, how important was your advisory board, the wise men and women that you called on, and when was it a good time to have that advisory board in place, please?
This is a great question. So the advisory board, and we're finalizing the recruitment, in fact, for our first advisory board, and just concluded 36 hours of interviews. We've had a really humbling show of support of different individuals who wanted to get involved. In terms of what's important and how the advisory board is composed, it's the diversity of backgrounds and skill sets. To have professionals who come from a development, education, consulting, investing, risk, finance background. So to have really this diversity engaged, but with the common thread of we are aligned in terms of mission and especially values in terms of what it is that we are here to achieve together in education. So the board is composed of really what I would say veterans, and they have 25 years experience, and we were also very lucky. Gayle has also been advising me and joined us as well. And so to also have academia and practitioners that have been where you want to go, that are able to mentor, to guide you at this very early stage where 2015 is still very much a startup year, and there's still very much that we need to learn, even before we're able to actually raise a fund. And having these veterans on board really makes a difference through all the stages of the fund, at the fund formation, also when we are looking to raise capital, and also when we're looking to look more deeply in terms of what are the investment opportunities, and later on in terms of maintaining the mission and especially the impact mission of the fund, making sure that that is maintained over time.
Okay, thank you very much. Quite a few questions here, actually. I guess this one is probably for Ryan. This is from Zachary Venner of the Aspen Institute's program. What were some of the challenges of launching the investment practice in the foundation from your side, and how will it leverage your existing grant making?
I'll answer the second part first. I think we saw this as a great opportunity in a lot of respects to support some of the organizations that we've already supported through grant making, and kind of provide the second phase of this. So as some of these organizations that we've been supporting for a number of years through grants get to kind of a more sustainable and growth phase, that we could then offer this as kind of a new tool. I think, as Joanna used the term, we're looking at this basically as another tool to support social innovation. Some of the challenges, I mean, I think the challenges are that we were really doing this from scratch. figuring out where it makes sense to draw the line between our BMW corporate asset managers and us as a foundation in terms of making investment decisions and how we should design a portfolio and that type of thing. That I wouldn't say was a challenge. I mean, I think we've done that very well, but it took a lot of time and a lot of kind of figuring out, because in a lot of senses this is it's new territory, and for people, you know, on our side where we're not professional fund managers here at the foundation, to figure out things like, you know, why should this be our investment priority and not this, and things like what currencies and geographies and verticals we should be in. I think it's just, in the end, the amount of work in a number of different areas that's required that is in sum, the whole challenge.
Okay. There's two other main questions, if I can kind of group a few questions together. One of them comes under the banner of how do we see the role people like the World Bank and the IFC helping in achieving scale. I don't know if that's something which Gayle or a member of the panel has a comment on.
Well, again, I can only, from my perspective, it's nurturing and mentoring with organizations that are large. They can use those seed capitals in the relationship to actually accelerate and scale much faster by investing in funds like Sandrine's, partnering with Ryan, working in concert with Joanna's work. Again, that distribution, broad distribution of funds that empower the World Bank and some of the other larger organizations have, can, I think, if done with intentionality, can build a global movement, which I think is really exciting. Ryan, Sandrine, Joanna, any other thoughts?
Yes, I would like to maybe give an example for Kenya, where this year, for 2015, a large organization also rallied together with the UN for the post-2015 agenda, and looking at, well, how can we pool together resources from different types of organizations, so foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation, together with the UN, are looking at, well, how can we make our grants potential investment for other impact funds, or can we actually also be catalytic to especially funding the operational expenses of impact funds. So this is really refreshing to look at Kenya being a pilot country this year, to see how can different types of funding, from grants to investment, we actually contribute to some of the post-millennium development goals, and how can we measure that over the next 10, 15 years?
That's fantastic. Steve, I know we've got 2 minutes left, and again, I think from my perspective, what we want the audience to understand is that the panelists represent the kinds of perspectives, the types of organizations, the remarkable people who are part of our program. And in April, we'll be joined by colleagues from the Gates Foundation who have $1 billion to spend in program-related investing. We'll be joined by a colleague from African Women's Development Fund. We'll be joined by BNY Mellon. We have a variety, big society capital. Again, we're bringing together doers, practitioners, and academics to really talk about how to scale and how to address the unique talents and needs of pioneers in the field. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve. I know we've got additional questions, and perhaps we can field those and put those online with responses. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And but I want to thank the panelists again for a fabulous presentation and participation. Steve, to you.
Thank you, Gayle, and thank you to Ryan, Sandrine, and Joanna as well for your time today. Several of the unanswered questions actually were around the topic of impact measurement. how that is measured, for examples from those, and how that affects the financing process. So perhaps that's a topic for our next webinar to pick up on that. It's always a hot topic. So to pick up on what Gayle was saying just now in terms of the program which we have coming up in April, we have a very international group registered for that program, and that really we kind of plan that and pitch that as a global best practice program. So if you want to work to put together your strategy and plan for impact investing and what that means for you, then a very good way to do that is to do that with people who are leaders in the academic and research side. So obviously we are lucky to have Gayle, who, as well as managing billion-dollar deals, has just been flying around the world for the last year, interviewing over 100 people for her latest research on book on impact investing.
1,000.
1,000. My apologies. And also Professor Alex Nichols, who is a professor of social entrepreneurship here at the Skoll Centre at the Saïd Business School, who will be teaching and bringing in members of his network as well. Also, a very important thing is to learn with other professionals and peers who are going through a similar process. So we have a fairly full classroom for April. We have space for a few more, but we have 40 people registered. To give you some insight on the types of people who are coming, in terms of geographies, we have people from, we have one person from Afghanistan, from a law firm there. We have 3 people coming from Australia. We have participants from Brazil. We have 2 from Hong Kong. We have a group of people from Luxembourg, the European Investment Bank, from Mexico, from SBX, which Joanna mentioned earlier on, from the Netherlands. We have a couple of people from Nigeria, the Private Sector Health Alliance over there. And then probably the largest group is from the UK. So we have getting on for 10 people from the UK and a similar number from the US, from a mixture of different institutions. They include some of the larger ones which you will have heard of, are people like Christian Aid, IFC, the Inter-American Development Bank. On the investor side, people like PGGM, the large Netherlands pension fund. On the banking side, we have a representative from Morgan Stanley, from Merrill Lynch. On the advisory side, who from PwC, KPMG, who sent a couple of people from Nairobi on the last year's program. We also are lucky enough to have people like professors from other business schools who would come to come here to take part as part of the program. So people from Hult, for example, law firms, impact investing firms such as Triple Jump, and founders of others. So perhaps people like Sandrine, if we wind the clock back a year or two, and some venture capital investors as well. So it's going to be a very full week. We have speakers who will bring really detailed case studies and really to direct a conversation to share the knowledge from those people who we've just talked about. So, for example, we have Karen Wilson, who's head of policy at the OECD. We have Daniel Sattar from Big Society Capital, who has a long history of social investing in the UK. Rodney Schwartz from Clearly So, who will be giving a case study of an impact investment in London. So we often think about the developing economies, but impact investing was also good for the underserved in the developed countries as well. And Kieran Boyle from the UK Cabinet Office, who's been working with the G8 task force and also developments on the social impact bonds as well. Internationally, we are lucky to have Daniel Itzo, who's coming again from Brazil. So he was one of the founders of the first impact investing fund in Brazil. So he'll be sharing some of his experiences of building funds in Latin America. And Sam Nwanze, who is the CIO from Heirs Holdings, which is the impact investing arm of the Tony Elumelu Foundation in Nigeria. Yeah, so we are literally struggling at the moment to fit it all into the week. So if you are listening to this webinar and you're on the fence whether you can find the time in your schedule to come along in April, we would recommend that you fill out your application over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then we will be full by the end of this month. So please send in your application now. In terms of follow-ups to this webinar, we will send an email with a few links. There will also be a recording of this webinar as well. So if you wanted to dig back in, then you'll be able to do that. And obviously there will be an opportunity to get in touch. Final thing to say is that I know in our programs it's very much a meeting place and a convening place. Lots of connections are made. We've had a couple of requests for connections even during this webinar, Joanna, so I will put one over to you after this as well. Just to say thank you again, really, so thank you to everybody out there who has been attending today. There are almost 100 people online, so thank you very much for that. And to thank again our pal, Joanna Reynolds, over in Canada at the Mars Centre, Sandrine, Henton. I'm not sure if you're in France or in the UK at the moment, but lovely to see you again. Thank you. And Ryan, nice to meet you, and thank you very much for your time and your insights today. And over to you, Gayle, for any final comments.
We look forward to, again, people coming and joining us in April. It's a remarkable experience, and thank you, dear friends and colleagues, and have a wonderful evening and day. Take care. Bye.